son of teachers. He graduated from Lawrence High, KU, and Washburn Law School, and has practiced law in Lawrence here for since he got out of law school. He was first liaison to lawmakers at the Kansas the Kansas Insurance Department, and then in 2002, he was appointed representative for the Kansas House 46, which you probably know is Central Lawrence, basically. He was then re-elected in 04, 06, 08, 2010, and 2012. And then in 2014, he ran for governor of Kansas.
You almost got it.
That's almost got it done. And while in the House, he became a minority leader. He will represent our 2nd District in the U.S. House after November. There's no doubt about that. He's going to win this election. We're going to do it because we work hard enough that it happens. So I'll turn it over to Ann now. And remember that the questions come on the cards that you've been handed. If you don't have a card, hold up your hand. Someone will bring you one. We won't take questions. You can't just shout out questions. Sorry. Okay, Ann.
Okay, great. I already have a whole stack of cards here, so that's great. It's great to see everybody this morning. We're planning to go just about an hour this morning with Paul. We have a few prepared questions that were done in advance by the organizers for this event, and we're going to do 3 or 4 of those, and then we'll get to the ones on the cards. And as I can see the stack growing, I'll try to sort through them, and maybe I can see already that there's a few kind of repeats or things that are related, so I'll try to kind of sort through them while Paul's talking and make sure that we get in as many as we can. I was going to warn Paul that we don't have a timekeeper here today, but the shorter you are, the more questions we get to. I'm sure everybody will really appreciate having that opportunity. And then we'll also give Paul a chance at the end to kind of wrap up and hit anything that he thinks we missed during our time this morning. So let's just get going. All right, let's start with this one. How will you ensure the federal government fights back against state and local laws that suppress the right to vote? And what should be done at the federal level to ensure election security?
Well, let me just first say I want to thank the Douglas County Democrats, and especially Kurt Hall, our chair. Being county chair is a thankless job in many ways, but Kurt has just done a tremendous job, and I want to just say thank you to everybody who's been involved. We have a great county party, the envy of many other county parties, believe me, because of the great work that so many people have done here. I see that I've got a tough audience here. My daughter just stepped in from her ballet class. She was wondering what I was going to be talking about today. I'm sure that very quickly here she's going to find herself quite bored and want me to take her to the farmer's market. But I'm going to try my best to keep the audience engaged. But the question about voter suppression and voter security, I think, is a very important one. It's one that is near and dear to my heart. After I lost the governor's race, I went back into my law practice and took on a case representing a couple of plaintiffs in the lawsuit against Chris Kobach. And fortunately, we have gotten some very good results from that case. And here in Kansas, basically, Chris Kobach put us out of voter registration business. Many of the people I see in this crowd have been involved with League of Women Voters. And League of Women Voters has done so much great work in registering voters. And Chris Kobach basically killed the good old-fashioned League of Women Voters voter registration drive. But thanks to Judge Julie Robinson, I think interpreting the law rightly, we're back in the voter registration business. By the way, Judge Robinson is not one of those, quote, liberal judges that they often talk about on Fox News or whatever. She was appointed to the bench by George W. Bush. So that tells you a little bit about what Chris Kobach has been doing. But at the federal level, we have the Voting Rights Act that was passed back in the 1960s, which the Congress has been trying to erode. And I think one of the things we have to do is we have to ensure that the commitment that was made to Americans in the Voting Rights Act is upheld. And we have to, I think, crack down on those states, and whether it's municipalities that are trying to take actions that are going to have the effect of suppressing people's ability to vote. Earlier this week, I was with Jason Kander, who's the Secretary of State in Missouri. Imagine that, a progressive Secretary of State who actually believes that we ought to make it easier for people to vote. That's a foreign concept to us here in Kansas in recent memory because of what Chris Kobach has been doing. But you know, I'm prepared to live with the results of an election. If everybody showed up to vote and I lost, I'd be happy because everybody went out and participated. But when you have people who are out there who are trying to change the rules to manipulate the landscape of who shows up at the polls, I think that is an assault on our democracy. And it's one that all of us, no matter what your political views may be, have to work to protect.
By the way, if anybody's having trouble hearing us, just holler. I think that the mics are carrying pretty well, but just give us a holler if you have problems. Let's jump into ACA. The Trump administration is supporting the federal court challenge in Texas that could declare unconstitutional the Affordable Care Act's individual mandate and the prohibition on companies denying health care coverage because of pre-existing conditions. What can be done to protect Kansans and other Americans with pre-existing conditions? And then I'm going to add on a question that came in from the audience about what is your position on universal Medicare?
Sure. Let me address the last question first because I think it relates a lot to the first question. You know, I have no doubt that in this audience, you know, we have many people who believe in the concept of Medicare for all. I want to see the wealthiest country in the world get to a point where every citizen has the great health care that they deserve, that it should be a fundamental American principle. I also think we have to be realistic in knowing that it's not going to happen overnight. You know, progress that's been made on health care has been very slow progress. And we know that whenever we try to do something to change the healthcare fabric in this country, there are many very powerful interests who are going to be fighting to preserve the status quo, whether they're insurance companies, whether they're pharmaceutical companies, and that's why I think it's critically important that we send people to Washington who aren't going to be representing their interests, and are going to be representing our interests, because we have unfortunately the inverse right now in Washington. We have people who are constantly protecting the insurance companies and protecting the pharmaceutical companies and allowing them to take advantage of Americans. But I think that the healthcare fight right now is summed up in this question very well. You know, the Affordable Care Act was a hard fight to get that through Congress, and the people who were there at the time will tell you that it's imperfect. They know that there are problems with it that need to be fixed, but they haven't had an opportunity to fix it because the Republicans in Congress have been unwilling to engage in a bipartisan dialogue about how it is that we really move forward on health care. And their position has been, you know, repeal, 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 repeal. Well, they finally did it, and they essentially had nothing to replace it with. And so what I think we need to do right now is we have to fight back the attempts to sabotage the good parts of the Affordable Care Act. And this lawsuit, it really threatens that. I don't think there's any provision that is more popular in the Affordable Care Act than the prohibition on discriminating against people who have pre-existing conditions. Whether that's diabetes, whether it's cancer, I can't tell you how many people I have talked to throughout the 2nd District who have a personal story about how that has affected them. And if this lawsuit prevails, and if the people who are in Congress and who want to go to Congress to repeal the Affordable Care Act succeed, we are going to be the losers as Americans. My opponent, by the way, stated the day after the primary that his #1 priority is to repeal the Affordable Care Act. I don't want us to go back to where we were before, where insurance companies can discriminate against people. So I think that we have to fight to protect the Affordable Care Act, the good provisions, and then let's talk about how it is that we fix some of the problems in the Affordable Care Act and how we move forward on addressing the issue that I don't think the Affordable Care Act really addressed very well, and that's the issue of cost. We brought a lot of people into the insurance marketplace under the insurance umbrella. That's a good thing, but we didn't really address the issue of cost. In my mind, I hope we'll have a chance to talk about this a little bit more. The biggest driver right now of healthcare costs is prescription drug costs, and we have to say to the drug companies that have been really running the United States Congress for many decades now, we have to say to them, you know what, we support your efforts to try to find drugs that are going to make our daily lives better, that are going to help save our lives, but that does not give you the right to gouge the American people. It doesn't give you the right to increase prices year after year by double digits. It doesn't give you the right to charge Americans vastly more than you are charging people in all across this world. Look at all of the brand new drugs out there that cost Americans far more than what other industrialized countries pay. We pay twice as much as the British do for Humira. We pay 5 times more than the South Africans do for Humira. You just go on down the list. The top 10 publicly traded drug companies last year made $67 billion in profits. I'm all for them making a profit, but that's far too much, and we got to do something about that.
I think let's move to tax policy, and I'm trying to kind of, reach in and pick out questions that kind of go with some of the stuff that we already had prepared. The question that we had was, what revisions or reforms do you support in U.S. tax policy? And then let's tack on one of the audience questions, which is, how can you convince voters that the tax cut is a scam?
Well, I'm not sure the voters need a whole lot of convincing, to be honest with you, because what I hear from people, Republicans too, is that, well, it looks like they cut taxes, but they didn't cut taxes for me. And that's the truth, if you look at it. Back when we were having this tax discussion, I wrote an op-ed for the Topeka Capital Journal, and I put out essentially my plan. I spent a weekend just diving through all kinds of information, and I found $90 billion of tax savings if we go close various loopholes and credits and things that just don't make any sense. And by the way, every single proposal that I had has bipartisan support in the Congress. And I said, there's $90 billion that we can pass along to the American people for a tax cut for the middle class and lower income Americans. Nothing for the big corporations, nothing for the wealthiest, because frankly, they don't need a tax cut. But you look at the plan that Donald Trump signed into law, 83% of that tax cut goes to people who make over $900,000 a year. I'm not making this up. That's not fake news. That comes from the Congressional Budget Office. 83% goes to people who make over $900,000. Now, I don't know if you know very many people who make over $900,000. I'm not sure I know anybody who makes over $900,000. There sure aren't very many of them that live here in eastern Kansas. But, this is what happens when the people who run Congress are working for the people who fund their political campaigns. And you see a tax plan that benefits a guy like Sheldon Adelson, who got a windfall of over $700 million Well, Sheldon Adelson got a pretty good return on investment. He's now given $30 million to this big super PAC that's running all the ads against me. But $30 million contribution for his $700+ million tax windfall. I mean, we need to be cutting taxes for people who deserve a tax cut. And if you look at the middle class, the growth of middle class income has been stagnant over the last 50 years. Right here in Kansas, we're paying the second highest sales tax on groceries of anywhere. And if you look at this tax plan, it looks a whole lot like what Sam Brownback tried to do. It's the trickle-down economics again. It's give it to the wealthiest Americans, and it'll trickle down. Well, Marco Rubio had a great statement about this a little while ago. He said, the commitment was that this was going to trickle down to the American worker, and it hasn't happened. Marco Rubio is right about that. And I think when I go to Washington, I want to promote tax policies that are going to give tax cuts to the people who deserve a tax cut and not to people who just simply don't need it.
I'm going to combine a couple more questions here about advocating for Kansas in Congress. How do you plan to be effective advocating for the 2nd District, given the gridlock in Washington? And do you have an example of common ground that can be reached with Republicans?
That's a question I get a lot of times. People say, why in the world do you want to go to Congress? And they're just fighting with each other. They can't get anything done. You're going to be one of 435. How can you make a difference? I was one of 125 for 12 years, and I was in the minority party, and I got lots and lots of things done because I could build coalitions, I could work across the aisle, and that's exactly what I want to do in Washington. We can't change the Congress if we don't change the people who are in Congress right now. And we have far too many people there that frankly are just creating noise. And they just go out and they try to play to their base and try to get reelected every 2 years. And they have no interest in really getting anything done. They don't have any interest in talking to people who are of the opposite political party. And I know we're here in a gathering of Democrats, but I'll tell you a quick story. When I was in the legislature, there was a woman who was in the Democratic leadership who came over to me one time. I'd been there for a couple of years, and she looked at me and she said, I've got you figured out. You're not really a Democrat. She said, you're always over there talking to those Republicans. And I just looked at her and I said, well, you know what? We're not going to get anything done here unless we go talk to them, because they are the majority party. And and it's one of the reasons, we were able to pass the largest increase in education funding, working with Governor Sebelius when I was there. We passed a comprehensive transportation plan that was the largest job-creating program in state history. We balanced the state budget without cutting education at the height of the Great Recession. We had to build a bipartisan coalition to get all those things done. And what the Congress really needs right now is they need some problem solvers. They need people who are willing to get things done. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. My opponent is going to be a lapdog for whoever the Republican leader is. He's just going to take orders from them and go off and do that. He doesn't have any interest in working with Democrats. And that's not going to serve anybody in this district. It just won't.
This has been a pretty hot topic lately. What, if any, revisions do you support in U.S. immigration policies, and if you could specifically address your position on DACA?
Yeah. Well, taking the latter part, there is bipartisan agreement, I think, across the aisle that we need to protect the dreamers and we need to move forward on DACA. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And unfortunately, President Trump and the leaders in the Republican Party have just, I think, wanted to use this issue as a political football and not really get done. If you had a straight up or down vote, I think in the Congress, I think it would pass with a very, very strong majority. There is no doubt that we have an immigration problem in this country. We have too many people that are coming across the border. And I think first and foremost, we have a responsibility to ensure that our borders are safe and that we are protecting Americans. But I don't believe the solution to this is building a very expensive wall. Somebody said, when you build a 50-foot wall, then somebody's going to start building 51-foot ladders. And I think what we need to be doing is we need to be listening to experts on border security as to how it is that we best accomplish this. I had an opportunity to talk to a congressman from Texas a little while ago who has his district that's right on the border, and and he said, he says, I know a lot about this, because this is what I live all the time. And so, there are incredible things that are going on in terms of technology that helps us secure the border. And he said exactly what I believe is that the big wall is just not the solution. But at the same time, we are a nation of immigrants. My ancestors came from Germany and from Ireland and from Scotland, and that is who we are as Americans. And I think if people are here and they are contributing to our economy, if they are playing by the rules, we need to give them a pathway to becoming an American citizen. And George Bush, when he was president, recognized this. He put out a proposal, and there was bipartisan support, if you remember the old Gang of Eight, and then the Republicans just got weak knees. They started hearing from their base, and they weren't willing to stand up. And so I think once again, this is an issue where we need problem solvers in Congress. We need people who can find bipartisan compromise and can move forward on this, because we just can't continue to have inaction after inaction after inaction from a broken Congress on a very important issue like this.
Okay, thank you. All right, what steps do you plan to take to protect our communities from gun violence?
I am a gun owner. I do believe in the Second Amendment, but I'm also a parent. And when I hear from my daughter about the active shooter drills that she is going through at school, it alarms me. Many of you grew up in Kansas like I did, and we were very familiar with tornado drills and what you have to do. But now, when kids are doing active shooter drills on a regular basis, and when I drive by the Jewish Community Center, and my daughter says, this is where we go when there's a bad person that's in my school, that disturbs me. And I think that we have to listen to those kids, those very brave and courageous kids who walked out of their schools and said, hey adults, we don't feel safe at our school, and we can't necessarily do anything about it because we're kids, but you can do something about it. And I think, no matter what your political views are, I think we as adults, when we see something like that happening, we have to take that very seriously, and I think, frankly, we're failing our children if we don't act. And so, what I want to see the Congress do, and once again, there is broad bipartisan support for a whole lot of things that I think are necessary, but we don't have leaders in Congress who are willing to take on the people who don't want anything to happen. And, so we have a background check system in this country that simply is inadequate. I think that is the single most meaningful thing that we can do. Schools need more resources for security. A few years ago, Sandy Prater and I co-chaired the bond issue here. It was the first bond issue that we passed, I think, back in 2013. And one of the things that was included in that bond issue was resources for school security. So now, at every school in Lawrence, with the press of a button, that principal or that school secretary can shut down that building. That's a great thing for our community, but it doesn't exist in a whole lot of other communities. And I think the federal government has a responsibility to help out with that. We have things out there that make guns into weapons of war. And whether bump stocks, things like that, I think need to be outlawed. There's broad bipartisan support for that. Ted Cruz, I mean, imagine agreeing with Ted Cruz on something. Ted Cruz has a bill that criminalizes straw purchases. Well, it was a straw purchase that led to the shooting at the Jewish Community Center over in Overland Park. It's absolutely something that ought to be done. But also make no mistake that we don't always want to see any more mass shootings, but the biggest cause of gun violence out there is suicide. My wife works as the suicide prevention coordinator for the Eastern Kansas VA. She deals with it day in and day out. We were talking last night about yet another suicide that she was dealing with yesterday. And we need more resources for mental health in this country. We have to acknowledge we have a responsibility as a society to help people who are struggling with mental illness, and we frankly are not scratching the surface in terms of the needs that we have right now.
Okay. We've got a couple of questions here about trade and tariffs. The first one was, how do you view the current U.S. direction on trade and tariffs? And then more specifically, what would you do to remedy the impact on Kansas farmers and other businesses of the tariffs in the current trade war with China, Europe, Canada, and Mexico?
Thank you for whoever asked this, because this is a huge issue for us as Kansans. What the president is doing right now is harming Kansans. It is harming our communities. We grow more soybeans here than any other crop, and I was literally out in the middle of a soybean field talking to a farmer 2 weeks ago in Franklin County, and I was looking at the rows of soybeans and reminded that 1 out of every 3 of those rows is exported to China. So when the Chinese put a tariff on soybeans and the price of soybeans drops $2 a bushel, it really hits home with a number of farmers. I was out last weekend and talking to a number of farmers who planted soybeans, and they're taking a beating right now. In Missouri, there was a study that came out that it estimated that the state of Missouri is going to lose about $725 million in economic activity as a direct result of the tariff on soybeans. And this is just affecting agriculture. It's affecting many, many other industries. I was in Coffeyville a while back and at a company that makes agriculture implement products, and the steel and aluminum tariffs are really killing this guy's business right now. It is all over the place. And what I think the president is frankly doing is he's trying to pit one group of Americans versus another. He's trying to play to people in the Rust Belt, and he's hurting people here. And this is where I have some issues with folks in our congressional delegation and frankly the Republican Party, because this shouldn't be a partisan issue. This is a Kansas issue. This is an American issue. And if there's ever an issue where Democrats and Republicans in Kansas ought to stand up together and say, Mr. President, you are doing things that are damaging our state and our people and our communities, and please stop it. Please stop it. I've been the only candidate in this race who has been vocal about this. Look at the candidates in the Republican primary and Mr. Watkins, and it has been crickets. They're afraid to stand up to the president and say that he is wrong. And frankly, we have to do that because he is hurting our state.
Okay, I want to make sure he wasn't going to continue on that.
I could continue.
Okay, our next question is for the audience. What will you do to highlight the 2 most important issues in this election? One is healthcare, which you've already kind of addressed, and the other is Social Security.
Well, if you have not seen our new ad on TV. I hope you do see our new ad on TV. All right, I'm glad to hear that. Everybody's seeing. People tell me, they see you on TV, and they're seeing the other ads, the ones that aren't true. But the ad that we have on TV, we call it "It's Personal." That's what we named it, and it is personal for me because before my dad passed away, my dad had Parkinson's, and he had a whole variety of medications that he took, and one of those medications cost over $1,000 a month. And that is a conversation that far too many American families are having. I mean, we sat around the kitchen table and talked about, how it is that my parents were going to be able to afford that and what they were going to have to do without as a result of that. And every time I talk about that, people come and tell me stories, just horror stories about how they're paying absurd amounts of money for prescription drugs. And so I'm going to talk about this as much as I possibly can because, as I said before, this is the single largest driver of healthcare costs. And we see senior citizens that are paying over half of their Social Security income for out-of-pocket healthcare costs, most of which are related directly to prescription drugs. We got to do something as a country. And the drug companies are just making record profits year after year after year. Price of Humira has gone up 100% over the last 5 years, 100%. And you have all of these instances out there where, a specific drug company, whether it's the EpiPen or something else, and they take advantage of a shortage and they raise the price up. That's just wrong, and the Congress is letting them get away with it, and it simply has got to stop. On Social Security, I think I see my mom and Caroline are no longer here. That Caroline got bored quickly, as I predicted. Probably down at the farmer's market. But my mom lives off Social Security. It is a big source of her income, and that is the case with so many American seniors. It is a bargain that we made with the American people. You pay into the system, and it's there for you when you retire. And I think that is a commitment that we cannot backtrack on in any way, shape, or form. And there are a lot of people right now, Paul Ryan, I'm glad Paul Ryan is leaving because he has been on a mission to try to radically change Social Security to the detriment of American seniors. And I'm glad he's not going to be in the Congress to do that anymore, but I have a feeling there will be more who will try to pick up his mantle. But we have to ensure that Social Security is solvent, and that it is going to be there for the Americans who have paid into it and are counting on it in their retirement.
Today is National Rise for Climate. Since Trump pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accord, what should Congress do to control the rising temperatures?
It is alarming to see the science and to see what is happening. I grew up right here in Lawrence, and I remember during the winter when there was snow on the ground. We're all enjoying a little bit of a cool end of the summer here, but that hasn't been the case across the globe. The science is undeniable. And for President Trump to pull us out of the Paris Climate Accord, I think is just a truly awful move that just flies in the face of all the evidence and all the data that is out there. We're the most powerful country in the world, and we need to be leading the global effort to deal with climate change. And when we pull out of an accord that every other country is a signator to, with the exception of Nicaragua. By the way, the Nicaraguans don't think it's strong enough. That's why they're not in. Syria finally got in. That just makes us look terrible. And we have to be leading, because if you go around the globe, I had the opportunity to travel to China, and in China they have a neighborhood coal plant, and the pollution is horrible over there. And they like to say that they're doing a lot about it, and they are making some progress, but it's going to take leaders like the United States to be able to rally the world community, because this is not a Kansas issue. This is not an American issue. This is a human issue. It is a global issue, and the United States has to be a leader in this issue.
Okay, we have a number of questions here kind of related to campaigning. I think that you might have some potential advisors in the audience if you would like to talk to them afterward. But let me just give you a couple of these which are kind of on the same topic. In your advertising, why don't you tell voters why they should vote for you, healthcare, etc., as opposed to your more current "I'm a good guy" advertising? How will you combat the TV ads associating you with Nancy Pelosi in a negative manner? And then let's just tack one more on there. How can Democrats counter the anti-liberal campaign of the Republicans and promote all the good things that progressive government has provided?
Well, first of all, I hope you have seen our new ad, because I think it's a great ad, and it talks directly about healthcare, which I think is perhaps the biggest issue that is on the minds of people right now, and they want to see action in the Congress. And so I think we have to effectively communicate with people that a vote for Paul Davis is going to be a vote for getting something done in the country about their health care costs. The Republicans are pulling out the same old tired playbook that they pull out election after election after election. And why are they doing that? They're doing that because if you go across the board on issues, whether it is climate change, whether it is healthcare, whether it's taxes, and the American people are not where the leaders in the Republican Party are right now. And so they really don't want to talk about these issues. And what they want to do is they want to make this campaign about somebody who lives in San Francisco or Washington, D.C. That's what they want to make this campaign all about. And I think, frankly, that is insulting to the people that live here. Because this campaign ought to be about you. It ought to be about us. I was getting my hair cut the other day down at the downtown barber shop, and the woman who was cutting my hair said to me as she watched one of these ads that came on, she said, "I'm just tired of all of this negativity and attacking." And she said, "I just want people to tell me, what are you going to do to help me?" And I think that is exactly where most people are at right now. And I think that we have to tell people over and over again and remind them that this campaign should be about them, and they should be concerned about who is going to get things done for them on healthcare or infrastructure or the economy, taxes, things like that. I've got a long record of doing that, and and they're going to they always like to put labels on you and things like that. There will be people that will fall for that. I mean, that's just inevitable. But frankly, I need your help in telling people who exactly, many of you know me. You've known me for years, and to validate me. I was at the Schools Foundation breakfast yesterday, and this woman came up to me and she said, I got one of those nasty push-pull calls. And she said, "I really gave it to that guy on the telephone." And I told him, I said, "You're telling lies about Paul Davis. I know Paul Davis, and I'm going to hang up on you right now." They got, it's the same old playbook. It's just the same old playbook. And frankly, I think people are getting tired of it, and I think people are going to see through it.
Okay, this is kind of a little bit voting and campaign related. A couple of questions. Where are the young voters? And how are we doing getting young people involved in voting?
Well, they're all around us. Some of them are here. And it was one of the reasons that we were up on the KU campus with Jason Kander the other day is because we want to do everything we can to try to engage young voters. I will tell you that when I ran for governor in 2014, I've looked back at all the data and the statistics, and young people did not show up to vote. And I bear some responsibility for that because I think that me and the Democratic Party, we have to do a better job of engaging young voters and talking to them about issues that matter to them. They don't care much about prescription drug costs. Many people in this audience do, but a lot of them, they don't. That's not a worry that many of them have right now. But what they do care about is climate change. They care about the fact that college tuition is becoming unaffordable. They care about the fact that we have an education secretary, Betsy DeVos, that is enriching the student loan industry at their expense. And I will tell you what I care about a lot is the fact that there was a study done that shows that in terms of outward migration of people between the age group of 18 and 25, Kansas is number 5 in the country. Our young people are leaving here because they do not see a future here, and we have to change that. We desperately have to change that. And I think, frankly, our political climate plays a big role in that. They want to see elected leaders who reflect their values that they believe in, and they look at people like Sam Brownback and Chris Kobach, and they just don't see that. And so I think winning some elections here is going to help us change that. But I'm going to talk about this in my conclusion. But we have to mobilize young voters. We absolutely have to do it. We got people up on the campuses here at KU and at Washburn and Penn State and the junior colleges trying to get people engaged in the campaign, and I think that we have an opportunity to do it. I really believe that it can happen this time, and they can make a difference in this election. They really can.
Okay, how can the U.S. address the growing problem of income and wealth inequality that is gnawing away at the nation's middle class?
If you look at wages and you adjust it for inflation, back in 1972, when I was born, the median income of the American worker, adjusted for inflation, is actually lower today than it was back in 1972. The growth in the economy is happening among the very wealthiest, the top 5%, the top 1%. That's where you see economic wealth is gravitating. It's not gravitating to the middle class. And there's a lot of different causes for that, but where I think it can start is our tax policy. And we talked about this a little bit, but we ought to be passing tax cuts for people and have a tax structure that is helping advance the middle class and is helping advance lower income people. When I was in the legislature, some of the Republicans would try time and time again to get rid of the Kansas Earned Income Tax Credit. And I delighted every year when they would do that, pulling out this great quote from Ronald Reagan and reading it all to them about where Ronald Reagan says, the Earned Income Tax Credit is the greatest anti-poverty program the United States has ever enacted. It's a good thing. It helps lower income people. But what I've seen just over and over again is, I saw it in Topeka too, where the tax cuts would go to people who had lobbyists, and there would be exemptions and credits and loopholes for all of these corporations or industries that had paid lobbyists. And then the burden of funding government would get shifted onto just the average taxpayer. And that's why we now pay the second highest sales tax in groceries right now. So the other thing I want to mention, with regard to this question is the economy is changing very rapidly right now. You look at automation, you look at the changes in the retail sector. Growing up in Lawrence, we always had a JCPenney's and a Sears. And we don't have JCPenney's and Sears anymore. And things are changing very rapidly. People are losing their jobs as a result of this. And I don't believe our country and our government have really understood this and embraced the change that is happening and figured out a structure for how we're going to retool that. You know, there's some really great things that are going on in many communities. I see Patrick Kelly sitting up there, and you know, what he is doing with the Workforce Center and at Peasley Tech, you know, really trying to provide educational opportunities for industries that are here right now and are going to be here in the future, and getting kids into a pipeline for that. That's happening in some communities across this country and here, but the federal government is really just sitting on the sidelines. And you know, I think that we need to get into the game, and we need to look at how we're going to help retool our education system, our workforce training system, to really provide for the jobs that are here right now and they're going to be here in the future, because it's not happening. There's a study done recently by the Kansas Department of Labor that, you know, right now 2 out of every 4 high school graduates has some form of post-secondary education. But the jobs that are going to be here in the next 5 and 10 years are going to require 3 out of 4 high school graduates to have some form of post-secondary education. I mean, we have to have a strategy for how we're going to do that. And frankly, we don't have that right now. And I think the federal government has got to get into the game here.
You're doing a really good job of getting through these questions. We're getting to a lot of topics. I think we can probably do 2 or 3 more, and then give you a chance to wrap up a little bit. As a freshman representative, what committee appointments do you believe you, 1, want, and 2, are most likely to be appointed to, and why?
I have not given a great deal of thought about committee assignments, because I've got to win this election first, and I'll maybe think about that a little bit on November 8th. I have said, though, there is one committee that I do want to serve on, and that's the Agriculture Committee, because I believe that having another Kansan on the Agriculture Committee is an important thing. Agriculture is such a big part of the economy in this district, and I think it's a place where I can really do some good for Kansas. And that's the one committee that I'm certainly interested in. But once again, we'll see what happens after November and figure things out from there.
Kansas after your name always helps on the Ag Committee appointments. Okay. What should be done about infrastructure, both in Kansas and the nation?
We have tremendous infrastructure needs as a country. And, President Trump said a lot of good things about what we needed to do about infrastructure, but what I wish he would have done was he would have tackled the infrastructure issue right out of the gate when he started his presidency. I think he could have found a place where Democrats and Republicans could actually come together and pass an infrastructure package. And instead, what he wanted to do was just take on a very partisan fight about health care, and it didn't end very well for him, obviously. And then, later on, when he tried to do something on infrastructure, it just has been insufficient. This is something I'm very interested in working on, and I think it's a significant issue for Kansas for this reason. It's no secret that state government is broke right now, and it's probably going to be broke for a while. And back in 2010, I was very involved in passing a comprehensive transportation plan. We have a tradition of passing 10-year transportation plans, and it fund lots and lots of infrastructure projects across the state. But because of what Sam Brownback did, we didn't get to realize the benefits of that transportation plan, and essentially just siphoned all the money to pay for his tax experiment. But I think the state is going to have a very difficult time passing a new 10-year transportation plan. And, if you look at the condition of our roads now, I hate to think about what they're going to look like 5, 10 years down the road. It's not just about roads, it's about sewer treatment projects, it's about airports, it's about a lot of those needs that exist out there. And I was on the phone with the mayor of Columbus, Kansas, clear down in the southwest corner the other day, and asking him about what's going on in city government there, and he said, I need help with infrastructure. He says, we have tremendous infrastructure needs, and we just don't have the resources. And what the state's done with the tax lid has really caused them a lot of problems. And so I hope that the Congress can act on an infrastructure project, and I think, frankly, here in Kansas, we're going to need that help. We're going to be able to maintain our roads and maintain our infrastructure like we want to.
Okay, do you support increasing public funding for early childhood education both in the state and nationally?
You know, I think the best use of our taxpayer dollars out there is the money that we invest in early childhood education. The data is all there. It's an issue that Kathleen Sebelius worked on when she was governor. I know it's an issue that is near and dear to Laura Kelly's heart, and it's something that I want to work on in the Congress. You know, you see the results that are produced by Head Start and other programs that you know, help kids that are at risk at a very early age, and they're doing just tremendous things. But you know, understand that you know, kids these days have challenges that are greater than they have ever been in the past. I'm sure we have some teachers here in the room that can tell you the challenges that exist. I see that at Hillcrest Elementary School every day when I take Caroline there in the morning, and you know, and I think that we have a responsibility, we have a moral responsibility to try to help those kids. And it's also, you know, it's dollars. If you can spend $1 helping a kid get off to a good start, that's not, you know, $3 or $4 you got to spend later on down the road when you're in the juvenile justice system or in the correctional system. So I'm a very strong advocate of that, and anxious to work on that in Congress.
This is kind of a specific question, but if somebody in the audience wants to know about this, we have a little time. So, as a member of Congress, will you work to strengthen our political, economic, and military relationships with Taiwan, and work to ensure that Taiwan is able to purchase the U.S. weaponry it needs in accordance with the Taiwan Relations Act?
Wow.
Whoever asked that question knows a lot more about this issue than I do. And I welcome your feedback. And you know, the relationship that the United States has had with Taiwan has always been a delicate one because of our relationship with China. You know, I am a strong believer that we need to have a strong economic partnership with China. We need to have a strong relationship with China. There's no doubt that the Chinese are bad actors in a whole number of ways, and I think, you know, the way that President Trump is going about trying to deal with that is really the wrong way to do it. But it is something that has to be addressed. But at the same time, you know, we have also had a very strong relationship with Taiwan. They have been a great economic partner. When we talk about being a military partner with Taiwan, that does jeopardize our relationship with China because they see that as really meddling in territory that they don't think that we ought to be meddling in. And so we have to do that, I think, in a very delicate way. But you know, we have a good relationship with Taiwan. I think we need to enhance that relationship. And I think that we also need to look at our global relationships as a whole. We have so many interests all across this globe, and I think, you know, a lot of people don't fully appreciate how much that actually affects our daily lives, you know, here in the United States. And when I hear that countries like Chile, Peru, and countries in Africa are now looking to China as their primary partner instead of the United States, that concerns me. It especially concerns me because we make food here, and we export that food because we don't consume as much as we produce, and we need markets to be able to bring that food in. And when South American countries decide that they're going to buy their soybeans from China or Brazil or something like that, rather than in the United States, we see the effect of that on Main Street here. And I think that's something that we have to be very, very mindful of. I think we also have to be mindful of our strategic military partnerships with countries all across the globe. And President Trump has done harm to a lot of those relationships. And I think that jeopardizes our security and jeopardizes our economic security as well. And those are things that I want to be very mindful of in the Congress. And I think we need more advocates who understand those relationships, the importance of those, and are going to try to hold the administration accountable.
Okay, thanks. Now is the time when I apologize for everybody's question I didn't get to. I was trying to group them and hit as many topics as we can, but we want to stay on the schedule here, so we're going to wrap up. I kind of can't resist this question, and I'm going to just give it to you and then let you kind of morph into your closing comments. The question is, what will you do as our congressman to address the current reign of terror, confusion, deceit, and disorder created by the Trump administration?
That is a big job. I think that, if you look at what's going on in Washington right now, and if you're frustrated, or if you think that you like what's going on in Washington right now, you probably shouldn't vote for me. If you want to see some change in Washington, I am your candidate, because I just don't think that Washington is working for people right now. And, we have an administration that is promoting policies that are directly damaging our state. You see the chaos that is just occurring, sometimes on a daily basis here. And I think it's just leaving lots of people, just shaking their heads. And, there was a woman that came to get involved in our campaign a little while ago, and she told me, well, my husband said that I had to go volunteer for your campaign because he's tired of me yelling at the TV. And you probably all know that feeling. And I'm gonna borrow a story that I heard Claire McCaskill tell a little while ago, and I just thought the way she told it was great, and I will do no justice to the story. But she was talking about when she was a young prosecutor and just got out of law school, and she was in a prosecutor's office and was one of just a couple of women in the office. And she was kind of trying to figure out how it is that you ingratiate yourself with some of the older guys that were in the office. And she noticed that a lot of the guys in the office cussed. And so she thought, well, you know what, I'm just going to start cussing a lot. And, maybe that'll help me kind of fit in. And so she started doing that. And one day, one of the veteran attorneys in the office pulled her aside and said, Claire, we have got to talk about your cussing problem, because it's getting really bad. And he said, I'm going to put a little jar here on your desk. And every time that you cuss, I want you to put $1 into this jar. And so maybe that will kind of wean you off of cussing. And so what she translated this story into, she said, when I'm out around Missouri and I'm at the grocery store or something like that, and she said, people used to come up to me and they would say, thank you for what you're doing, or they'd talk to her about an issue, and she said, now people are coming up to me, they're grabbing me by the shoulders and they're saying, help us. And so the challenge that she made to the audience is she said, every time you feel like that, or you feel like cussing, I'm going to bring back the little jar that you need to put some money into. And she said, that jar lives at ClaireMcCaskill.com. Well, for you, that jar lives at DavisForKansas.com. But you know, money is important, but let me tell you, we're going to get outspent. We're getting outspent every week. Right now, those ads, Congressional Leadership Fund is running, they're spending about $250,000 a week. I mean, that is big money. They're going to spend several $million by the end of this election. We're being outspent about 4 or 5 to 1 on television right now. We're going to start closing that gap with the help of so many of you in this room, and we need to keep closing that gap. But where we're going to win this election, I think, is out there on the streets and out there on the country roads in eastern Kansas. And we're going to win it with people power. I see right now an army of people that are mobilizing, you know, all over this district, that are out knocking on doors, making telephone calls, and that is the critical work that we have to do. We have a big, you know, we got a big task ahead of us. This is a district that Donald Trump won by 19 points, and all of us know that it is very hard for Democrats to win in Kansas, but I think that it absolutely can be done. And if anybody out there who says to you, like some people say to me, oh, you know, I think Davis has got it in the bag, you need to remind them that Democrats have not won a congressional or a statewide election in 10 years in this state. And at the same time, the state's registration has gotten more Republican. Now, we're starting to change things there, but we really need your help. And so many of you have already helped our campaign, or helped another campaign, and what I guess what I want to leave you with this challenge is that we need to come back, come down to the headquarters, get involved. Whether if you like to make phone calls, make phone calls. If you like to knock on doors, knock on doors. If you like to help stuff envelopes, stuff envelopes. And we can find something for you to do. Steve Ramsey's sitting over there, goes out and knocks on doors for me all over the place and all the time. I met a man the other day who's 89 years old in Topeka who told me, I'm going to knock on 1,000 doors for you. That is my goal over the next couple of months. And the other day when I came out to the county party headquarters and we were going to have a canvass and it was raining, and I called our staff and I said, well, what are we going to do? It's raining out there. And they said, well, we're going to turn it into a phone bank. And I came out to the headquarters and people they had their umbrellas, they had their rain jackets on, and they said, nah, you know, we're going to go out and knock on those doors anyway. That gives me a great deal of inspiration. And it's something that we need. And I want to, I guess, leave with, this is ironic in a Democratic audience here, but I want to talk about a good Republican for just a minute. We lost a great patriot in John McCain recently. And what has transpired, I think, as a result of his passing is something that's very powerful. And I think that it's something that we need to channel as Americans, you know, over and over again. Cindy McCain wrote in an op-ed in USA Today yesterday, and she said, we must join together, shaped by our deepest values of liberty, equal justice, and respect for the dignity of all people, hardened by unwavering courage and integrity, and step into the arena to fight for a greater cause. President Obama picked up on that in his eulogy by saying, so much of our politics, our public life, our public discourse can seem small, mean, and petty. Trafficking in bombast, insult, phony controversies, and manufactured outrage. It's politics that pretends to be brave and tough, but in fact is born of fear. John McCain called on us to be bigger than that. He called on us to be better than that. So I hope that you will join me in trying to honor John McCain's legacy, honor his wishes by making this campaign about something that is really greater than all of us. It's about making our country better. We don't need to make America great again. America is already great. What we do need to do is we need to make it better for every American. So before you leave here, I want to ask you to do a couple of things. I want to ask you to pick up a yard sign. If you haven't picked up a yard sign, if we run out of them, just go out to the headquarters and grab one. Grab a bumper sticker, put it on your car, do a little free advertising for us, and volunteer. Volunteer to help us out. Because what David and Kurt said is absolutely right. I mean, we need a big turnout here in Douglas County if we're going to win this election. And if we win this election, I believe we're going to change the landscape in Congress, and we can start getting our country back on the right track again. So thank you for being here today.